Good afternoon! Oh, it's a beautiful day. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, Tracy Connors. Tracy.
Yes.
It's a great day in America. You know why, Tracy?
Why is that, Fingers?
The Clintons are gone. No more. Bye-bye. Oh, to be a fly on the wall. When she turned to Podesta and said, "You and your goddamn emails, you go talk to the plebes." Oh, well, really, Tracy, while we could sit here and talk about the victory and what it means to the country, at the end of the day, this is your victory, Tracy Connors.
Oh, it is?
Yes, because you've been wanting this for 15 months.
Oh, it's not wanting it. It's knowing that it was probably inevitably going to happen.
So I feel like I should step back and just let you bask.
Say I told you so to everyone? Oh, I've been doing that. Believe me.
Oh, my
I do enjoy it, but I'm also being magnanimous. I've decided that's the tack I'm going to take. I had an internal debate to gloat or not to gloat. And I feel like I want to stick with the lefty kind of deal that they always talk about, the punching up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Well, I'm assuming what you're going to say by this is that you are going to attack people with a bigger microphone.
Correct. That's punching up.
Yes.
So I consider it, punching level is going after my friends, and punching down is, I don't know, going after random liberals on Twitter.
Right.
So I will engage in that only if they come after me, which I had one do yesterday, and it was delightful. Took, I think, 3 exchanges for her to drop an F-bomb on me, and then in the 4th, I was a white supremacist.
Oh.
Who was going to be so disappointed when I find out that I was conned. And I shut that down by saying, "Oh, no, sweetheart, I know something you don't know. It's all a con." That's why I think this is fun. I'm like, oh, this is so great. It's all a giant con. And there's only one little segment left of the population that needs to get woke. And that's why I'm taking the magnanimous path. And, I took to Facebook and I see my friends, my liberal friends who I like, but I've removed them from my feed so I don't have to see their stuff because I can't resist. And so I had to individually go visit their pages to see how they were handling this.
Are they handling it well?
No.
They aren't?
No. I know it's shocking. But a lot of them are still in the entertainment industry, so this is understandable. They have their own kind of bubble, much like our DC friends have their own bubble.
Right.
And, when you're a liberal, you just assume everybody's a liberal. And when you're a conservative or a libertarian, you also just assume that everybody's liberal.
Right.
So you don't talk about politics unless you know for sure who stands where, and then maybe you will attempt to do those things. But so I went on there and I said, hey, look, and I'm going to paraphrase this. I see some of my friends today that are utterly devastated and terrified. And I would just like to point out to you that a lot of the stuff that you believe is not true. And I hope that, I would like you, I'm opening up a comments on this, list your fears of what you think is going to come to pass in the next year. And then a year from now, I'll repost this and we can revisit. And then underneath it, I said, all my friends who are celebrating today, I'm there with you. But, this is specifically for these people to air their grievances, whatever. So if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, basically.
Wow.
And I had a couple liberal friends immediately say, like, this is really nice. Like, this is the nicest thing I've seen anybody do today. Thank you. But they won't tell me what they're afraid of. Only one told me what she was afraid of. And she seems to be under the impression that hate crimes are going to go through the roof. And then the perpetrators of said hate crimes will not be prosecuted.
Oh, okay.
So, okay, that's nice. And this girl's incredibly sweet. We've had political conversations before. I worked with her. She's in film. And I just said, okay, I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing. And, if you want to talk about these things, call me. I'm happy to kind of walk you through why this stuff is all BS. A lot of it's overhyped. I have to resist being like, oh, did you miss the last 8 years of things?
And you're already seeing hate crimes hit video of hate crimes hitting Facebook. I just saw one today where a group of black Utes pulled a white person out of his car and beat the crap out of him, saying, "You voted for Trump. Yeah. You voted for Trump." Beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, it's grotesque. It really is, and this is manufactured through the media, and I think it's a shame that I think it's really hard to break out of the hypnosis, which is, for lack of a better word, what's gone on. And so I found a great article that a guy that claims to be a progressive libertarian, whatever that is, he was a Bernie guy. It sounds like an oxymoron to me, but that's okay. Everybody's allowed to label themselves however they so choose. And it's entitled, "Dear Democrats, read this if you do not understand why Trump won." And he kind of had a similar experience that I did this season, like going out and actually talking to people and things, and reading a variety of sources. And the main takeaway for me, and this was, throughout his piece, but this is also my own thinking, is, hey, and our buddies over at the Art Wing Conspiracy tweeted this, and now I want to read it verbatim because it was such a good encapsulation of this whole notion that, let me find it. Stand by for just a moment. Okay, so Dave Rubin, who I give a hell of a lot of credit for, former Young Turks guy, now has his own show after he left Aura Network. That was Larry King's network.
Oh.
And Dave had his own show. And it's through Dave that I found people like Mike Cernovich. That was the first time I was introduced to him, was having a progressive guy interviewing conservatives and libertarians and alt people that are labeled with alt-right but don't necessarily consider themselves that, this and this. So Dave Rubin had tweeted, "Hey, media which got everything wrong will now tell you all of the things that will happen as a result of the thing they said wouldn't happen." And so our friends at Art Wing retweeted that with a message attached saying, "Dear progressives and mainstream media hypnotees, if they lied about Trump's chances, consider that they lied about everything else about him and wake up." And I think that's our opportunity here. So that's why I reached out to my lefty friends that are just freaked out. I mean, I can't remember. I think it was Jezebel had a link that one of my friends shared. These are all the causes that you can support now to make sure that America doesn't go down the drain and people's rights aren't stripped left and right. So I looked at the list. And do you want to take a guess? There's a couple of the nonprofits that were on this list that must be supported.
Americans United for Change?
I don't know if that was on there. It's possible. It didn't stick out to me. Maybe. Think about worse, more disgusting and contemptible ones. Come on. Number one, it trended on Twitter the second Trump was announced the winner.
Oh, see, I was on Twitter. You fill me in.
Oh,
I'm drawing a blank.
All right. Planned Parenthood, NARAL.
Oh, okay.
And my all-time favorite, the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Oh, okay. We're going there.
Which is such a sham organization. Yes. I mean, number one on the list was the ACLU, which I agree with. Mm-hmm. The ACLU legitimately gets into, they're a First Amendment organization. And they take that seriously. And they tend to lean left, but they'll get in there and fight certain things that we would agree with as well. So I give them a pass. But I mean, oh my God, Planned Parenthood's getting shut down tomorrow. Shut the hell up.
Well, this is all the Mike Pence
yes.
part of the ticket. Because, it amazed me. I've got friends here in central Indiana who are liberals. And I checked in a couple of times, but I'm really trying to stay away because I'm doing my best. Because, look, from the very beginning that I was not riding the Trump train, although I found it highly entertaining.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when we got closer and closer to election day, it was, okay, how can we stop the Clintons? And the only way you could stop the Clintons was to vote for Trump. So voted for Trump. And now I'm really enjoying the shit show that has been created by this victory. But so I've been checking in on my leftist friends and, I'm seeing a lot of wanting to move to Canada, the typical stuff. They're getting ready to get their uteruses.
Yes, the IUDs.
Yeah. Well, microchips put in the uteruses. So you got to get ready, Tracy Connors, to go to the uterine re-education camp.
They're gonna chip me for what
apparently.
purpose?
Who knows? I don't know.
To make okay.
But,
so it's an abortion preventative chip.
Who
so
knows?
It will not allow you.
I don't know. Just to keep track of what's going on.
Of where my uterus is at all times. All right, good.
One of the favorite things I saw on Facebook was you just ignored the facts. See, that's all these people out there, the moonshine drinkers out there in Hacksaw Jim Duggan country. They just ignored the facts, Tracy Connors. The woman was a lawyer. She has so much more experience than Donald Trump. Forget the fact that she also had a lot more experience than Barack Obama back in 2008. But the people that voted for Barack Obama weren't sexist. But now, you see, It's different.
Yes.
Experience matters this time around. But what's funny about that is I keep seeing that same talking point. And what it reminds me of is the ugly American going to France and being surrounded by a bunch of people who don't speak English, so they feel like if they just speak English slower, it'll
and louder too.
Yes, it'll soak in. No, you don't understand the facts. Well, actually, I do. No, you don't understand the facts. Well, I actually do.
No.
Please get off your soapbox about him being a shit stain, because your candidate was a shit stain too.
Yes. Her resume is just a little bit different than his.
I mean,
that's all.
The stuff that came out in the last month through WikiLeaks, the idea that they could use that charity, and I'm using air quotes when I say charity, with the Clinton Foundation to help pay for Chelsea's wedding.
Yeah, but they probably don't know those facts.
Oh, did you get that on Fox News? You saw that on Fox News, didn't you?
Yeah, I think Fox's viewership something like 3 million. So last I checked, I think about 60 million people voted for Trump. So you're telling me, that 3 million number is not like it's the same 3 million. When they top out on their highest rated shows, it's 3 million. So let's be generous and say maybe it's 12 to 15 million, maybe 20 million that check in. You're still not even at half.
Oh, you saw it on Breitbart. That's what you did, didn't you?
It's possible. I mean, Breitbart gets more hits than Fox gets viewers, but yes. So actually, I went directly to WikiLeaks and read the treasure trove that the Russians managed to wrench from the gnarled fingers of one Mr. Skeletor Podesta. That was so vile when he came out there. I was sitting there. I don't know if you stayed up because we haven't.
Unfortunately,
spoken.
I had to. Well,
that's right. You were at work.
I saw the first part of it right up until they called, I believe, North Carolina, and then I had to leave. I was at our good friend Tony Katz's house, and we filmed a few videos. Thanks to Tony over at WIBC, Tony Katz in the Morning News, for having me come over. But no, I then listened to it on my smartphone. So I was listening to CNN's coverage because I was getting a big kick out of it, because Wolf Blitzer was orgasmic every time there was just a little bit of good news for the Hillary Clinton. Oh, breaking news! Hillary Clinton, we can project just one Guam.
Oh my God!
I was waiting for the balloon drop after it came in. They
don't get to vote in the presidential.
Guam.
No. Yeah, it doesn't happen. But I get your point. Yeah, it was quite fascinating to be able to watch it and see this effort to still maintain this alternate reality that they created.
Right.
So I was watching Fox Business because I find Fox to just be annoying and arrogant, and most of them were not Trumpers. Their coverage was, I think, anchored by Megyn Kelly, who we all know hates him, Britt Hume, and maybe Brett Baier. So forget it. I'm going to watch the Fun Time Gang over on Fox Business. So they had our girl Kennedy on there. Dobbs is funny, Cavuto's funny, and they were just having a fun time of it all. And they had the numbers, and I wish I could remember exactly, but at this point, they still weren't calling Pennsylvania. And Drudge had linked to this New York Times dashboard thing that they had created, which was phenomenal.
Yes.
And you could watch every state and the predictor of how likely it was that Trump would win. And so we're looking at Pennsylvania, and I had been out at my polling place, and Trump got crushed at my precinct, just crushed. And it's almost split even Republicans and Democrats at my polling place. And so we had Republicans coming in there and voting for Hillary Clinton. Like, I live in never Trump land.
Yeah.
I live in Snobsville, where these people are just, nope, can't have him. He's brash, everything. You know, he's going to turn the White House into Wayne Newton looking house. I don't know if you've ever seen Wayne Newton's house. It looks like Trump Towers too. I mean, it's Midas went in there and just went nuts and touched everything. But I had seen pictures from my congressman, who I dislike immensely, even though he's a Republican, he's a squish. His campaign, our chief of staff was there to greet people and hand out information or whatever. And she happens, I grew up with her. And she was showing me pictures from an area called Potts Grove, which is northeast suburbs of Philadelphia.
Okay.
Further out, closer to like the Scranton area kind of deal. So white working class. The line at 7 p.m. was 2 hours long to vote.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, damn. These people got blankets. They got chairs. They got hot chocolate. Thank God. It was pretty warm. It was like 60s. But I said, oh, God, that's it. Done. This is over. Yeah, they got people out in Philly, but you cannot overcome this because the Philly turnout was down from Obama, of course.
Right.
You could drive through the city and not see a single damn Hillary poster, but there's a Bernie mural. And there's still Obama posters up in people's windows in Philadelphia. And I thought, oh, great, it's over. So I'm looking at the New York Times thing around even before midnight. They were saying Trump was about 85% chance likely to win Philly or win Pennsylvania. And Molly Hemingway actually pointed this out both on air, I believe, and on Twitter. She said that this is typical for the Democrats when they know that they're going to lose. They hold back votes.
Yes.
So that they can push the announcement to later in the evening. Apparently, John Kerry never came out and conceded in 2004. I don't remember this. He didn't give a concession speech that night either because they engaged in the same nonsense where they just don't turn in votes to their precincts.
And that's what happened in Michigan, too.
Yeah.
I mean, and CNN tried to make excuses for Wayne County in Detroit or in Michigan, which is Detroit, saying, well, they're always notoriously slow. It's like, okay, you can see the handwriting on the wall. They're holding back votes.
Right. And I mean, in Philadelphia, holding back, it's electronic voting machines.
Yeah.
It's not like in my precinct, we do paper ballot. They get run. It's the Scantron sheets that we took those tests on in school. They run them through a machine. And at the end of the night, they do a hand count to make sure the numbers match. So that machine says 1,000 ballots went through. Do we have 1,000 ballots? Yes, we're good. Okay, done. But in the city, it's touchscreen. So the machine is keeping count, and all they're waiting for is some elected official or election judge to turn that over to the county. So they were sitting on those. But it was pretty clear by midnight. And then all the networks are terrified to call it. But you flip. So Fox has Trump in the electoral count at 220, I want to say, and her at 180 or something. You flip over to MSNBC. They have him below her in electoral count.
Of course.
Like, what?
Oh, and now I understand why Wolf Blitzer was so orgasmic about Guam.
Oh, why?
Hillary Clinton, the U.S. Democratic nominee, has overwhelmingly won the vote in a tiny Pacific island, which has correctly predicted the outcome of the presidential election for the last 32 years.
Oh, that's funny. They actually get to vote in the presidential election?
They just have a poll.
Oh, because I was going to say, Puerto Rico doesn't. They get to vote in the primaries, but they don't get to vote in the general.
Yeah, so they hold a general election poll every 4 years, even though it has no members in the Electoral College.
And we know those polls are always so spot on.
Yeah, so she got 71% of the vote, while Trump received 24%. So that's why.
And that's kind of shocking because this is the majority of the population on the island of Guam, at least Americans that are, I mean, it's all American, it's American territory, but it's a military base.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, I just read that from Al Jazeera, who's also doing backflips, I'm sure, when they posted this story.
It's a quality network, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, there was a time, so, you know, she holds off on saying anything, which is so incredibly tacky.
Right.
And just classless and rude. So I figured, holy God, Did she had a meltdown. I mean, that's a given. We know there are enough stories of her throwing things, screaming at people. You and I have all these daydreams about her scolding interns with hot coffee because
somebody
Huma brought
had
her
a gin
behind.
gimlet thrown in their face.
Oh, at least. But it was just so stunning to see Podesta come out, and his quote was something along the lines of, "She's always been with you," and then I'm like, "But not now,
right?
Huh? I mean, this is terrible." And Michael Malice, who is an evil genius, was on with Tom Woods yesterday talking about this, and I think he's correct. He said, "I think what happened was they were so convinced that they were going to win that they didn't bother writing a concession speech."
Oh, absolutely. I don't have the story in front of me, but according to sources familiar
was it
with
the Ed Klein?
It was on. Let's see, I found it on the Hill. They haven't done any real polling in a month.
Her campaign?
Right.
Well, that's incredibly stupid.
They had this thing wrapped up, Tracy. Why bother doing any polling?
I don't know if I believe that. Well, I guess you have so many polling firms doing it anyway, but they weren't concerned about internals. I can't believe they didn't learn the lesson of the primary, that this is a whole new ballgame. And I'm looking at the spending numbers. You know, they had said this was going to be a $2 billion election. She didn't even raise $1 billion. And that's including, you know, her campaign plus super PACs. I think I was just reading it, Investors Business Times, that she ended up with a little under $700 million, and she spent $600 million. And Trump spent about $300 million.
Wow!
So he spent $5 a vote, and she spent 10. I believe that's how that shakes out. I mean, it's just everything's gone. The playbook is done. Our good friend, Mr. Bo Snerdley, was hitting me up on election eve, and he's like, he just destroyed everything. The pundit class, the media, all of the models that say ground game is so important, that say television advertising is so important. It's all done. It's a brand new day.
Boy, I wish I could find that piece, because it made sense that they had at least scaled back on doing any kind of internal polling, because they
were burning money like crazy. I'm surprised they have any money left, because if you'll remember in 2008, one of the deals they struck with Obama, I believe it was when she agreed to be Secretary of State, because she held out on that. They had to come back to her 3 times.
Yes.
Was that he would help retire her campaign debt. And so they hit the list. I think some of that's in WikiLeaks too, that they turned over the Obama for America list to them. Oh no, they had this whole scheme where you could rent Hillary's list, which happens all the time. I mean, a lot of these organizations build up an email list, and then you can rent it to people. They use it one time, and it's, you know, 20 grand, 30 grand. It's almost as absurd as her speech rates. But if those lists, you know, if they're useful and you can get money out of them, it makes sense that there would be a price to get them from them. But
sure.
Yeah, so I'm shocked. I'd be shocked if they weren't in debt. But I thought when she didn't come out, my first thought is she's had an aneurysm and she's dead.
No, it was clear, I think. I believe Drudge posted a picture underneath the lead on Drudge of her standing in her pantsuit watching a TV as they were showing footage from the Trump party. She had to have been in the bag at that point. I mean, how would you have liked to have been Bill or Podesta or Huma? Somebody had to walk up to her and say, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
How would you have liked to have been that person? I mean, I would have loved it personally, but if you work with her and know how she is and know what the reaction will be, they had to, if she could lift up a plate and break things, if she had the strength to do it, they had to have gotten the breakables out of the room. Yeah, and you're right. They had to have drawn straws. My guess it was Kelsey.
I guess that falls to the campaign manager, though. No, I think just chain of command, it has to be Podesta that does it. Well, he's got black magic voodoo on his side, which was another thing I wondered about, too. You know, they screwed over the entire island of Haiti And Haiti's way into that voodoo stuff. So thank you to the island of Haiti for placing a voodoo curse on the Clintons for just utterly destroying your country by stealing from you and then helping to rig your elections so that another piece of shit leader would take over after they pillaged you guys. So thank you to Haiti.
Oh, boy. I knew she was in trouble when Virginia was so close.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it was like, okay, and once again, Fairfax County was the county that held back votes until the bitter end. It was like, okay, this is so close. You know, if you go back to 2012, I kept telling Tony, it's like in 2012 at 8:30, it was over.
Yeah, it was over before I left my precinct. I was in on the count, and they had already called Pennsylvania for Obama.
I mean, they were calling polls closed at 8 o'clock. They were calling the states at like 8:02.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept looking at Tony. It's like 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30. I was like, this was supposed to be over by now. This was all supposed to be over, and yet no states are being called. And then you're seeing states like Virginia, where Trump was ahead for a long time in the vote count, and you kept telling yourself, okay, he's not going to win Virginia. He's not going to win Virginia. It's not going to happen. But still, it shouldn't be this close. Why is it this close?
Yeah.
And then we found out, and especially, Pennsylvania was a surprise to me because I thought, Philadelphia would figure out a way to.
Now, Philadelphia was being monitored heavily by a whole bunch of different groups, and I think successfully so. And with Trump coming in, I hope they clean out the DOJ successfully and start prosecuting some of the stuff that was going on that day. Because I believe O'Keefe's got a bunch of stuff on camera. I know other people got some things on camera that are just disgusting. Mm-hmm. And if you'll remember, one of the first things that the Obama administration did was punt the lawsuit against the Black Panthers for voter intimidation. Right. So I don't think that'll be going on anymore. I don't think the DOJ is going to be used the way that it has been, or at least that's my hope.
Yeah, we can only hope. Well, we have a guest today, Tracy.
I'm so excited.
Our good friend from Fox News and the Washington Times, Monica Crowley, is joining us. So why don't I give Monica a call right now? It's good on Skype to do this because you can just cold call people and you won't hear the beep boop 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 where smart people can figure out the number. Monica Crowley is here.
Hi, what's up, guys?
Hey, Monica.
Hi, what's cooking? Good looking.
Monica,
I miss you guys.
Oh, miss you too.
Oh, man.
This is what I plan to do. I'm putting my feet up on the desk right now because I know when you're on Fox, you only get 20 seconds to get your point in before Bill O'Reilly or someone else jumps in and interrupts. I'm just going to put my feet up on the desk, get out of your way, and Monica, how do you feel?
Wait, are we rolling?
Oh yeah, we're going.
oh my God, okay. I was just about ready to shoot the breeze with you and be like, what's up, guys? When do we start taping the interview? But this is the interview.
Oh yeah, I just called
okay.
Well, no, but if this is all on tape, we could shoot the breeze. But I figured we only have 12 minutes with you, so.
Right. I know. It's been such a crazy week, but such an exhilarating week, you guys. I cannot believe this. I am still processing all of this. I am reeling from this. Part of me feels like this is all a dream and we're going to wake up and it's going to be like November 5th and we're looking at polls still and it looks bad and everything else. What happened this week, there are so many elements to it, but I just want to start out by saying that what happened this week on Election Day and night has just sort of reaffirmed my faith in the American people, which honestly had been shaken over the last two presidential election cycles. But what happened this week really reaffirmed to me that the American people still know what America is all about, and they want to bring the country back to its previous greatness, which we have lost in this hot mess of leftist destruction under Barack Obama. And the more I think about it, the more I think that where everybody is saying that Donald Trump is the exception to the rule, I think now in retrospect that Barack Obama was the exception to the rule, and that because he was such an exceptional political personality as the first black president, he got elected and then reelected without people sort of putting that exceptional nature of him together with the policies he put in place, which were incredibly destructive, economically, politically, culturally, you name it. That people sort of divorced the man from his policies, but now the country is self-correcting. So he was the aberration. He was the exception to the rule. And now the country wants to go back to our foundational principles of limited government, fiscal responsibility, strong national defense, law and order, strong economic growth and job creation, all the things that got this country to its exceptional place in the world. Donald Trump ran on that message. He ran on those things. And I think now the country is back to where it was before this aberrational pull of Barack Obama.
Now, Monica, I have to ask you, if you had a choice of either being a fly on the wall when they broke it to Hillary that it wasn't going to happen, or be a fly on the wall when President Obama met President-elect Donald Trump at the White House, what would you pick?
That is a really fascinating question because both of those situations are fraught, right? I mean, there's Schadenfreude and then there's Schadenfreude. You know what? Here's what I would choose. I would choose the fly on the wall with Mrs. Clinton on election night, and here's why. The fly on the wall between Obama and Trump, probably not all that interesting, because they were both on their best behavior. They're sitting there in the White House, the outgoing president and the incoming one. There was nothing hostile or uncivil said, I guarantee it. I guarantee they were both just perfect gentlemen and very gracious to each other. So nothing really new to be learned from that. I mean, Obama may have said something like, you know, have you realized what you just got yourself into? Like, I'm sure there was maybe a funny line like that. But other than that, I think it was, you know, Obama probably sort of debriefed him on the organizational parts of the transition and what to expect in the first day and the first night in the White House and that kind of stuff. Maybe they talked about the Syrian civil war, maybe Russia, maybe Iran, just briefly, of course. The more interesting thing to me would have been Mrs. Clinton that night, because I think now, in retrospect, and I was on the Fox News set from about 10:30 at night all the way through 3:30 in the morning when we finally called the race for Donald Trump. I think she sent Podesta to the Jacob Javits Center that night because she didn't have a concession ready.
Right.
I think she didn't have a speech. I think, and knowing these people and having observed the Clintons for 20 plus years, I think the hubris, the narcissism, the arrogance was so in the extreme that they believed their own hype, they believed all of the polls, they were ready to go with a victory speech, and when it was clear she was losing, she had nothing to say. She literally had nothing prepared. And that's why they sent Podesta out and they got some speechwriters on board at 5 o'clock in the morning to whip something up for her to say at 11. I honestly believe that was the case, unless she got sick. I mean, maybe something happened, that the shock of this sent her into a seizure or something. I mean, who knows with this woman? So I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall in that situation, watching her watch the actual returns come in, because in some ways this was reminiscent of 2004, when the exit polling was showing John Kerry was on his way to the presidency, and they were actually on TV. People were on TV picking his cabinet. And then real returns, like actual votes started coming in, and the map started to change. And I'll never forget this. My boyfriend at the time was at a Hollywood party that night in '04, and when the exit polling came in and was indicating John Kerry, all of these Hollywood celebrities were like whooping and hollering and laughing and champagne and then when actual votes came in, I remember he emailed me at the time and he goes, Sarah Jessica Parker is in the corner crying. crying. And I thought, you know what, on election night this week, I'm like, you know what? I want all of these people back in the corner crying. Crying. And guess what happened? They're all, I mean, I live in Manhattan. I can see people on the street crying. I'm serious, to this day. Okay, here we are, 48 hours after the event, and people are still walking around like in a dumbfounded shock. And now I see people like, they're like, oh, this is our 9/11. You know, like these liberals are comparing it to 9/11. We were attacked by the Islamic enemy, okay? They're like, oh, this is our 9/11. They're walking around like dumbfounded and like in shock with a box of Kleenex under their arms.
Well, Monica, I was watching the coverage. I'll admit on Fox Business, I did pop over to see you briefly, but I find
thank you.
business to be a little bit more jovial, and I appreciate that. But I was sitting at home watching the New York Times, their dashboard thing that they had, and I knew pretty well by midnight that he had won.
Right.
And I'm just sitting here waiting and thinking, what goes on if you can tell us a little bit? Why won't the networks make the call when it's pretty obvious? Like the New York Times had a 95% chance winning Pennsylvania.
I know. And by the way, you guys, that was one of the most delicious parts of the night, was watching the New York Times forecasting model. I was on their alerts, and it started out like something like 40%. And then it was 56%, and then it was 78%, and then it was 99% or whatever it was. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the New York Times? This is not the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post or the Washington Times? No, this is the New York Times. I was fortunate enough to be in the green room in between my hits on Fox News that night, to be seated with my good friend Doug Schoen, who was Bill Clinton's pollster. And Doug was watching some of these early returns in some of these key states, and he looked at me very early and he said, he's won it. And I said, how do you know? Because the decision desk is not. And he said, Monica, I do this for a living. He's won it. Because he was watching early returns from Pennsylvania in particular, Ohio, and some other key states, North Carolina, and of course Florida, and then Wisconsin, which came as a big surprise. But when Pennsylvania was coming in, at one point, I think there was only about 12% polling places reporting. And he looked at me and he goes, he's going to win Pennsylvania. I said, what are you talking about? Mrs. Clinton's running, 15 points ahead of him right now. And he goes, Monica, Philadelphia comes in first.
Yeah.
This is as high as she's going to reach. And when Western Pennsylvania comes in, that's it. It's curtains for her. He's going to win Pennsylvania. So he was telling me this at like 11:02 p.m. And, of course, we didn't call Pennsylvania until 3:30 in the morning. So I was fortunate enough to have that inside glimpse. But I can tell you that the decision desk, the reason it took them so long, and why Arizona is still outstanding, I have no idea. Don't ask me about that, because they still haven't called Arizona, which is obviously going to Donald Trump. But I do know that in some of the key states, they run models that compare the exit polling with actual trend lines that are coming from actual data, and they can usually call races relatively early, just matching those two numbers up based on what precincts are coming in. But there were some key states where they were waiting on some outstanding precincts that may have counterbalanced some of the other data that they were getting. And of course, nobody wants to make the mistake.
Sure.
And I would say I have no evidence of this point. It's just my guess. But since every other network has been vehemently and stridently anti-Trump, none of them wanted to call the presidency for Donald Trump. And I think they were waiting for Fox News to do it. I have no evidence of this, but I think they were waiting for Fox to do it.
It was stunning to be able to sit at home and flip channels. And I'm sure in the green room at Fox, they probably only have Fox News on if there is a television. But if you flip between Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, the electoral counts were totally different. And MSNBC had her ahead at times when he was already over 200. And they had below it.
At that.
It was stunning. Like, these guys are going to keep up the ruse that reality isn't what we all know it to be until the bitter end. And then they're going to be in for a rude awakening.
At one point on Fox that night, either Megyn or Bret Baier came to me on this question. And I said, for those of us who live and work in Manhattan, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, San Francisco, I said, this is not normal. We are living in a bubble in these places. We're in this echo chamber, and we're not talking to normal Americans who live in the normal parts of the country. And when you start talking to them, you realize what was happening out there. I had a handle on it. I knew, boom, immediately. I mean, I must say, to toot my own horn here a little bit, I was the first person 2 to 3 weeks after Donald Trump announced his candidacy, June of 2015, where I went on national television and national radio, and I said, stop laughing. Do not underestimate him. He can pull the whole thing off.
Mm-hmm.
And people continued to mock and laugh at me, and I said, just watch. Because what it occurred to me as I watched what was unfolding and how Donald Trump was so brilliant and so savvy at expressing and embodying was that his movement is actually the latest iteration of the Tea Party movement.
Mm-hmm.
The Tea Party, which started in 2009 and in 2010 delivered the House of Representatives, massive wave election, and then in 2014 delivered the Senate to the Republicans, massive wave elections. The Tea Party was under direct assault by this administration, which weaponized the IRS to silence them and crush them. Well, that worked temporarily to get Obama reelected in 2012, but that same group of people, normal, hardworking, tax-paying Americans who just want to take their country back from the clutches of the left and Obama, that movement never went away. Mm-hmm. And it found its champion in Donald J. Trump.
And I agree with that, and I would add one more group to that mix, and that's the Gamergate kids. And they launched
that's interesting.
The online campaign. Yeah, I never understood that really until I read a book recently called Social Justice Warriors Always Lie, written by Vox Day. And he's a gamer guy and a sci-fi writer, and he has a chapter explaining that, what happened.
Wow.
And it's fascinating. Wow. And those guys use the same kind of tactics. They were on board with Trump because they come from 4chan and Reddit world. So they knew how to do all this mimetic warfare, if you will, on social media. And they got on board right away. That's where you get Pepe from. He comes from those kids. That's where you get all these weird things.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really fascinating for me to hear because I hadn't even thought about that. But what is so important to keep in mind about Donald Trump is that he is revolutionizing the Republican Party. He is transforming it largely into a populist party. And he was able to ride the tiger of the realignments going on across the Western world, where the unprotected class is in full revolt against the global elites. The elites who are inflicting all of this stuff on us, which we have to live with on the ground every day. Bad economies, massive immigration, the Islamic threat. They don't have to live with it. They jump in their limos, they get on their private jets, they live on Park Avenue or in Paris, within sight of the Eiffel Tower, and they don't have to live with the consequences of their decisions. Mm-hmm. We do. And the people on the ground are in full revolt. Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, regional elections of populists in France and Austria and Germany. You're going to see this next year, too, in the French presidential election. I guarantee it. Mm-hmm. The unprotected is in revolt against the protected class. Donald Trump understood that. And yes, he's a billionaire, and yes, he's the 1%, but he's still a guy from Queens. The trucker hat, the Big Macs, that's genuinely who he is. And the fact he doesn't talk like a slick politician, and sometimes his grammar is bad, which really annoys me because poor grammar is my pet peeve. And the tweets used to make me insane. No grammar, no punctuation. I'm like, what the hell? But the average person could relate to that, and they looked at him and said, he's one of us. He might have a hell of a lot more money than the rest of us, but he's one of us. He gets me. He understands. That kind of raw authenticity is something that money cannot buy. And the one thing that generates that also you cannot create in any campaign unless it's authentic is an emotional bond with the voters. Donald Trump had that emotional bond with the voters who then, when the pile-on began, who then created a protective shield around the guy. They were there to defend their underdog and then deliver the presidency to him. And as I'm saying this to you now, guys, my hair is standing on end, literally, because it is such a powerful force.
And it's truly historic. So I just had to get that in there real quick. I know you got to go, Monica, so sorry. But I haven't heard anybody say this on television. He's the first person to win the presidency that never held elective office or was in the military.
That is exactly right. And the other point that I've been making all over Fox and with you guys is this. This is a man who has never done this before, ever. He basically had no money relative to her $2 billion at her disposal. He had a skeletal campaign. He basically had no guidance, because, again, he's never done this before. And he beat one of the most fearsome, well-funded, most ruthless political machines in the history of the United States. That is an astonishing achievement.
And he reached those blue-collar workers that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Monica, that I had been yelling, screaming from the mountaintops for people to understand that we're in the bubble that you're talking about, that these blue-collar guys were gravitating to his message, especially about NAFTA and TPP. And that's, really the reason why he carried states like Michigan and Pennsylvania. But I know you've got to go, Monica.
That's right. Well, one final statement, and then we'll say goodbye until next time. But he was able to redraw the map for that very reason, Fingers, because he was not a traditional Republican or conservative, and he spoke directly to those blue-collar voters, to the issues that directly affect their livelihoods. Think about it that way. Mitt Romney, John McCain, I voted for all of these guys, okay, fine. But none of them spoke directly to these folks in ways that they could understand, appreciate, and sink their teeth into. Donald Trump said, I understand you. I get you. I know you because I am one of you. And we're going to rip up these trade deals that have crushed you and your wages and crushed your jobs. We're going to deal with illegal immigration because that's also suppressed wages in this country. We're going to bring these companies back. We're going to do corporate tax reform so all of these trillions of dollars sitting overseas comes back to the U.S. and puts you to work or gives you a raise. Nobody in the past, all of these other Republican nominees have spoken to them from a height of 30,000 feet. Right? Like right. They've all said, they talked in statistics, the unemployment rate or the national debt, $19 trillion or the unemployment rate at 7%, whatever. It was all cold numbers. Donald Trump understood the power of the emotional message, and that's why he's the president-elect today.
And we'll have to leave it at that. Monica, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And please, things are really crazy out there right now. Stay safe. And we'll talk to you again soon.
I appreciate it so much, you guys. You guys have been really good friends to me, and now we have something to celebrate for the first time in a long time.
That's
right. Yes, we do. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Monica.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
Take care. She's the best.
Unbelievable. And she was the first person I remember seeing on television saying this stuff.
Yeah. But I'm
her and Coulter out front.
I'm genuinely concerned. I'm just saying generically. I'm not saying that people are going to target Monica, but people who live in Manhattan, seeing what's going on in Manhattan, in Chicago, and Los Angeles, things are getting really crazy right now. You've got these left-wing groups that are, whether they're bussing people in or doing some sort of online campaign to stir the pot to get people out to protest and, really doing everything that they claim that the right would be doing. They've become. And they do that all the time.
Yes. I mean, this is their deal. They project. They project. Trump's people are violent. We come to find out, no. I mean, you and I knew this beforehand. No, they're paying people to go there and start shit.
Right.
And then additionally to lie about things. Like, I will never forget when that lady, I think her name is Shirley Teeter, claim on television. There was articles all over the left because, unlike the left, I read both sides, and they were running around screaming like their hair was on fire that this old woman with an oxygen tank had been punched in the face by a Trump supporter at a rally.
Right.
And they were interviewing this woman on camera the day after this supposedly happened. You know what I immediately noticed about her face, and what any reporter should have noticed about her face?
What's that? No marks?
Not a bruise on it. Yeah. I'm not one of those stupid women that thinks that I'm stronger than a man. I don't even care how little he is. He's stronger than me. And if he punches me in the face, there's going to be a big old bruise.
Exactly.
And probably a missing tooth or two.
Right.
I mean, who was the MMA fighter that they allowed in that had transitioned from male to female? And they let her fight women. And the fights were lasting 3 and 4 seconds.
And she was like breaking orbital bones.
Right.
Of her opponent. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. That's called reality. And these people are really good at manufacturing false reality. And that's why I feel bad for my liberal friends, because they've been cocooned in that. And now they're coming out of it. But I knew that was going to happen, those riots. I told you about that months ago. And
right.
I had considered going up. Gavin McInnes was having an election night party in New York City, and I thought, oh, that would be fun. But do I really want to be in New York City on election night when Trump wins? And the answer was no. And the only thing that staved off that stuff that happened last night from happening on Tuesday was they pushed the call so late.
Right.
You're not going to get those people out into the streets at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. There were some altercations because the people were leaving Hillary headquarters, I guess, and heading over to Trump Tower and causing fights in the street. I saw some videos of that kind of stuff going on. And that's genuinely organic.
But I don't think it probably would have been a safe place to be, because I don't think any of the Hillary people would have wanted to mess with the Proud Boys.
No, but by that time,
especially
I don't know if I sent you the video of them when the call finally came in, and none of them could speak. I mean, they could barely stand up.
Oh, sure. And I didn't see the Gavin McInnes show the next day on the Kumia network, but I did listen to it, and he sounded rough.
Oh, yeah, you need to watch it.
He sounded
It's
rough.
Unbelievable.
But
completely hungover.
Going back to what you said, I think that part of the problem is because you have so many casual observers of politics, the Johnny-come-latelys that just come in for the last 6 weeks, and they're liberals or they're conservatives, but they get really, really wound up by what they see on the internet, where you and I know that a lot of these protests are being orchestrated,
yes,
funded by lefty groups. We know that when we see someone post a picture, which I saw on Facebook from a lefty friend, of a wall that there was graffiti on it with a swastika saying "White Power, Trump America 2016," that very well could have been painted by a lefty to push this narrative. But casual observers that are just jumping in at the last minute, who don't follow this stuff, who don't realize there are a lot of these groups out here that, that one that James O'Keefe exposed, sending people to Trump rallies to try to cause a disturbance. This is typical of what the left does. We understand that, and we can spot it a mile away. I mean, I don't know if you saw some of the footage of the protest last night. These people are carrying professionally printed signs.
Yeah. That are already protest the inauguration, I saw.
Sure. Which I was planning on going. I don't know. Come
on.
I was like, I'm not going to be stopped by these people, these goons. Screw them.
The day of the goons are over, and this is some of their last gasps. They're going to keep this stuff up. But that's why I think it's important to start trying to wake up our friends that are still, it's still possible to get to them. And I think reality is going to smack them in the face, especially this new contrite Trump, which I like Smash Mouth Trump, but that's not a reality.
Right.
He didn't get up and say, Obama, you're fired, and Hillary, you're going to jail when he won, which is what I want to see.
Sure.
But I do think that if he makes good on a lot of his promises, which I think he will, because as our friends of the Never Trump thing like to point out, he's an egomaniac. Well, if I agree to a certain extent, so then it follows that an egomaniac wants to keep everybody liking them, right? This is narcissistic egomaniacs. They want adoration from everybody. So in order to do that, he's going to have to actually fulfill promises.
Well, but he's dealing with a Republican Party packed with pussies. And
I know, but Paul Ryan just ran out to the microphone. Love him now. We're ready to go. Okay. And I heard old Reinsy boy was on Limbaugh today. And you know that Limbaugh does not typically have guests on. And Reince is basically like, hey, let's do this, bitch. Let's bring it. And I do think there's a new attitude come to Washington with Trump.
I hope that's the case, but I'm skeptical because
I know.
We talked about this during the 2012 campaign. If Romney wins, will they really repeal Obamacare, or will they just fix it? And that's what I'm concerned about. Is I see a Republican Party that has caved repeatedly because of pressure put on them by the mainstream media. If you've got people out there protesting like we're seeing in New York, LA, Chicago, and other cities, and then they start throwing in the when Obamacare comes up for a repeal and they've got the kids in the wheelchairs,
Yep.
will the Republican Party have the backbone to say, it's really awful that we have sick children out there, people with pre-existing conditions, but we got to figure out a way for those people to get their health care without screwing it up for everybody else. And that's what Obamacare has done. It's made it crappy for everyone, which is fine with liberals. Well, at least it's crappy for everybody. That's what the end game is.
They won't even concede to that point. I mean, they're still saying it's wonderful. Sorry to interrupt you, but I went to Obama's Twitter feed on election eve after, Trump had been announced. And I'm like, did he say anything? Hillary's crickets, both the POTUS and the at Barack Obama, nothing. But on both of those, there's a pinned tweet or something of him giving an ad for how great Obamacare is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these people are delusional. They screwed themselves in that law that they didn't bother to read by having the provision that insurance companies have to tell you before the open enrollment period begins, which is November, whether or not your plan is getting canceled.
Right.
So all these letters went out. I can't remember if it was CNN saying this, but one of the exit polls was saying that 47% of people voted on the Obamacare thing.
Of course.
That was their motivating factor. And it was those people getting letters in the mail. And we talked about this last week. You can't avoid that reality. You can turn on the television and they'll tell you everything's great. But when you've got that letter sitting on your kitchen table, and I've got it downstairs right now from Aetna, and it came with like 8 pages. I'm like, what the hell is all this? Oh, it's in 17 different languages telling me how I'm getting screwed. I think it came in Mandarin. I believe it's in Korean, South Korean, obviously. It was just insane. And it's like, wait, we'll help guide you through all this. And now I'm like, do I even bother? Is he going to be able to root this out in a couple months so I don't have to pay insane rates for insurance that I don't want? I don't know what to do. And one of the other interesting stats, CNN's got all their exit polling information, and I hadn't heard anybody talk about this. So they said, when did you decide your presidential vote?
Mm-hmm.
In the last month, 26% of people decided in the last month. Trump won those.
Yeah.
Which is stunning. And then people that decided before that, she won, but just barely, 51%.
It's those letters.
Yeah, I think so.
It has to be a big part of it. I know they want to keep going back to Comey and the FBI and the last minute reopening of the investigation, but I'm sorry, it goes back to what that one professor has been saying for months with his 16-point system that will tell you who the next president of the United States is. When you've got a bunch of people in this country who are getting screwed over by Obamacare, when you have, if you look at the polling data, 70% of the American people saying that we're heading on down the wrong track. Right track, wrong track. It's wrong track. You're not going to, at that point, look at those numbers and say, well, clearly they're going to vote for the status quo.
Right.
And that's what Hillary Clinton was. She was the status quo. And really, I will say this. This is where I believe they screwed up. They wanted to make this a personality-based election.
Yeah.
And do any of us know what Hillary would have done to Obamacare? Or at least claim that she would have done to Obamacare? Would it just been
fix it?
Probably just to fix, but we don't even know because we were too busy talking about pussy grabbing.
Well, she did have an opportunity in the town hall style debate to discuss it. And I can't remember what her answer was.
But the
it
media
was probably involves like, oh, we'll just strong arm those bastard insurance companies again because they're the real enemy in all this.
But the media and the Clinton campaign, for the most part, wanted to steer the discussion not to issues, but to this man is unfit.
Mm-hmm.
And this really shows the arrogance of the Clinton campaign and the left. When you see all of this data coming in that the country is going in the wrong direction, and people really have a hard time dealing with the idea that they're going to have to pay these increased premiums with Obamacare. You have to tell people that you aren't the status quo. You have to tell them, you have to show them how things will be different underneath you. But they didn't want to have that conversation. And maybe it's because they knew that they could not convince the American people that they weren't the status quo. So maybe that's the reason why most of the stuff that we were talking about was about pussy grabbing and not about real issues.
We talked about this back on the snark factor in the Obama days when he actually mattered and things like this. And the leftist mode is always to promise utopia, but it's got to be a future arrival date.
Yeah.
Their grand schemes can't actually ever go into effect because once they do, then reality takes over and they can only paper over it for so long. And so we predicted this was coming a while ago. We all knew, and we were naysayers, and we didn't know what we were talking about, that Obamacare wasn't going to work as structured. It's just it's not not a good way to solve a problem that you all created in the first place, which is basically what government does. They come in with a solution that then creates a bigger and different problem, and then they have to come in and fix it all over again.
That's right. And that's what you're going to see from the left is as this system continues to spiral out of control and Obamacare goes down the toilet, rather than saying, gosh, you know what, this grand experiment was a complete failure. We got to get government out of healthcare as much as we possibly can. It's going to be a double down. And I've already seen it from some of my liberal friends posting how great Great Britain's system is. And, it's fantastic. And I'm like, do you guys have Google? Because 10 seconds, I can pull up a story about how there are certain areas of Great Britain right now that are rationing surgery, and they won't operate on fat people or smokers.
Sure. And I mean, you can just Google NHS deaths.
Yes.
That's it. And I can't remember how many people died of dehydration in the hospital. In a hospital. People are dying of dehydration. It's not wonderful. But it's looking at the facts that it's only looking at the facts that you want to see. It's a myopic view of the world.
Right.
And we try to take into account as much information as possible. I mean, this chick that came after me on Twitter last night because I tweeted Jeremy Siegel, Rebel Pundit, was out filming the protesters in Chicago last night, and he put out a video. And it was good. I mean, they're just F Trump, just ridiculous stuff. And I don't know how he doesn't get punched. I think he has gotten punched before. But he's kind of goading them a little bit and just saying, okay, well, what are you going to do? We're going to stop him. All right, well, how? And these kind of things. So I just tweeted it out, and I said, the left stays classy. And this triggered some SJW that decided to come after me. So she starts screaming. This is before I got called a white supremacist, which I just find hilarious. And she said, how many people are going to die because they don't have health care? Which health insurance and health care are two different things, but you can't even get them to admit this. And or how many people are going to lose it or something like this. And how many people, get this, what percentage of our species is going to perish because of increased CO2 emissions? They said, okay, lady, you did a quick Google because, I have that ability. And I kind of knew off the top of my head the number of still uninsured Americans. Mm-hmm. So you remember they sold us, the number flipped between 40 to 50 million people.
Right.
Do you know how many still don't have insurance?
I'm guessing it's close to 40 million people.
It's 30.
Yeah.
So we got 10 million more people insured. Maybe, if I believe the government and their shit statistics.
Well, we only have 12 million illegals in this country, Tracy. I mean,
sure. Well, maybe all 12 million of them got health insurance. So I said, I just hit it right between the eyes. Well, there are 30 million people right now without it. So where are your tears for them? And do you ever wonder why they don't have it? Is it perhaps because I didn't get into this. So I just said answer number 1, 30 million don't have it right now. And number 2, 0. A grand total of 0 people are going to die because of increased carbon dioxide. And I was going to get real snarky. And I went to the IPCC report, parts of which I've read. This is the inner, what the hell is that called? I can't remember what it stands for. The inner something climate control panel, whatever. That's what they use for the Paris Accords and these things. They have a table of all the models that they use. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about 25 to 30 different models.
Yeah.
That they put in. Okay. So I wanted to say to her, which one of these models do you think is the most accurate? Because what they do is they combine them all and average them out, and then that's what they decide is true. So you're telling me this 97% of scientists agree that there are 75 different models available, and we're just going to smush them all together, and then that's what we're going with, even though they've been completely inaccurate thus far. I mean, it's terribly funny. They can't even predict the outcome of an election properly, and you think you can predict weather and temperature? You guys are morons. And then I'm reading stories, solar activity is going into an all-time low, and I think that gigantic nuclear explosion fireball up out in the sky might have a little bit more of an effect than your Range Rover. Just a guess.
And the other thing too is when they talk about how they're combating climate change, they're also declaring war on the poor.
Yes.
Which they don't want to acknowledge the fact that if they want to make energy more expensive, the people who are going to get hurt the most by that are the working poor, the people who are on government assistance. You can only stretch $1 so much. You're going to make gasoline more expensive. You're going to make electricity more expensive, which makes food more expensive, which makes clothing more expensive.
No, but we've got to save the planet because it might get 1 degree hotter in the next 100 years.
I mean, the Kyoto Treaty, which that's
we didn't do
from the past, but I believe the numbers were so ridiculous that we had to spend something like $100 trillion, and even after doing that, it wouldn't even affect the Earth's temperature by 1 degree.
Yeah, it's nonsense, and there are solutions to it. That it's funny because I've had conversations with friends of ours that agree with us on this topic, and they've actually researched solutions. Mm-hmm. And there are some things that could work, and they just don't want to do it. Like apparently, there's a guy created a tree that's made out of some kind of strange plastic kind of thing that actually sucks carbon dioxide out of the air. Mm. And you could put them all over the place for, I can't remember if it was a couple $100 billion or whatever, but problem solved then. Done. Can we just move along?
But that because it all has to do with excess.
It's about controlling behavior.
Well, there's that too. But, I had a discussion with a friend several years ago, and I firmly believe that if, say, General Motors could come up with some radically new way to propel their automobiles to where a Chevrolet Suburban, which is a complete gas guzzler, mm-hmm. if that vehicle could get 150 miles to the gallon, liberals would still hate that vehicle because it's big.
Yeah, it's ostentatious.
Yes, it's excessive.
Well,
you don't need that big of a vehicle. Well, what do you care?
Well, the solution that you're talking about actually exists, but it's not getting 150 miles to the gallon. It's using alternative fuels like ethanol and I believe it's methanol. You can run your cars off alcohol. Any flex fuel car can be run off of alcohol. And that was the original setup that Henry Ford designed. The combustion engines were run off of alcohol because at the time, you're talking 1920s, 19 teens, it was really hard to get crude all over the place into the Midwest and into some of the less populated areas. I mean, it's the same kind of problem we have now with broadband service and things like that. So imagine carting around crude oil and getting it to gas stations in the middle of Oklahoma. Like nobody's doing that. It wasn't reliable. So Ford made his engine so they could run off of both alcohol and gasoline because anybody can make alcohol. I mean, that's an American tradition that goes back for forever. So there's so many things that you can use. Most organic plant material can be used to make some form of alcohol. And then what happens is you get John D. Rockefeller that has an oil monopoly, even though they broke it up, which made him the richest man on the planet. But he started dumping money into the temperance movement. So when they passed, which is at the 20th Amendment, and then it was undone with the 22nd, one of the stipulations was, okay, we're still going to allow gasoline to be used in cars, but that gasoline must be mixed with X% of petroleum, which basically killed the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So today, if you have a flex fuel car, you can do this.
Well, and there are vehicles can be run on liquid nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a whole distribution problem with that, but
sure.
But when are we going to start asking our friends, and you and I do, but when are we going to start holding the leaders of the environmental movement accountable for their failures when it comes to their predictions? I mean, Al Gore, who I believe Dennis Miller said it, where he said, I'll take him more seriously about climate change when he's living in a shack like the Unabomber instead of in a huge mansion with a carbon footprint the size of Maine. But, there was a famous clock that I believe Rush Limbaugh put on his site, which counted down to when Miami was supposed to be underwater. Mm-hmm. And that date just passed, I believe, last year.
Yes.
And I don't know about you. I haven't been to Miami recently, but I don't believe it's underwater, Tracy.
It's clearly not.
But there's still nobody points to on the left points to Al Gore and says to him, "Gee, Al, I was just in Miami. Why were you wrong on that?"
Mm-hmm.
When Leonardo DiCaprio is flying all over the world on private jets, talking about the how climate change is going to destroy us all, it's like, well, geez, you really don't care about your carbon footprint very much. Why should I?
No, they care more about intentions than outcomes.
That's right.
It's the same thing with Hillary, and the Clinton Foundation does really good work.
They do
actually,
now.
no. Yeah. Oh, man. Really good work. I don't know how. I mean, just looking at that and saying, okay, they started a charity to help the world's poor, and now they're worth, I don't know, between $200 to $300 million. That's a little odd. Who knew that helping the poor was so lucrative?
Such grifters. How can you look at me with a straight face and not at least say to me, these are good people with honorable intentions? You cannot say I'm broke leaving the White House in 2001 and then amass a fortune in the neighborhood of what, $200 million?
Somewhere around there.
How?
Yeah.
When you didn't build anything. You
helped poor people.
Yes.
They went all over the world to help the world's poor, and they came home with bags and bags of gold.
I mean, how many times have we heard liberals criticize people like Pat Robertson for doing that?
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay to build a fortune off the backs of the poor and donations if you're a Clinton. And
it certainly is.
You could pay for your daughter's wedding.
Well, and the other thing is they were broke because he was getting sued all the damn time.
Right.
And I heard somebody talking about this the other day, and they were totally mischaracterizing the lawsuits. They're like, well, he was getting, impeached. Yeah. Okay, that's not what the lawsuits were. That bankrupted them or, drained their coffers. Remember, he had to pay out Paula Jones $850,000.
Yes.
That's what the lawsuits were. And they're sitting here hemming and hawing. Oh, my God, it's going to be unprecedented. Trump's going into the office with 1,500 lawsuits pending. Well, some of those are him initiating it. And I've never run my own business, but my dad has one. And I can tell you, frivolous lawsuits come all the damn time.
Sure.
Once you start amassing any kind of money, people want a piece of it. And they'll file frivolous crap left and right. And you have to take time and money to go defend yourself. I mean, the litigation culture that we have is just out of control. And maybe that's something that they can get at a national level. I don't know if that works at a national level or it has to be done statewide where loser pays. And I think that's how you kind of put that back in the box. And that keeps people from filing frivolous lawsuits if they know they're going to have to pay both sides legal fees if they lose.
Right.
I mean, it's just insane. Like, I'm not going to get into the lawsuits that my dad's been involved with, but they're hilarious. You're just like, really? You had to take 2 days out of work to go defend this stuff? Like, people didn't just laugh them out. Nope, totally legit. You're allowed to do this. It's unreal. So I can see why normal everyday people are like, what? He's been involved in, I think it was something like 3,000 lawsuits over the course of 30 years. This is not that surprising.
You just want to go, pay attention.
Please,
to the world
wake
around
up.
you.
Wake up.
People in California are throwing an absolute shit fit.
Oh, it's delicious. And I don't know if you've seen this because you said you missed social media, but as I predicted, if he won, you were going to see leftist secessionist movements.
Yes.
And Cal Exit was trending, and I'm like, here you go. Love it. Absolutely adore it. Get the hell out. We will help you. The 10th Amendment Center is located in Los Angeles, I believe. They can teach you everything you need to know about states' rights and secession.
And it's
funny, that's no longer a racist proposition.
Oh, of course not. And this is, I'm reading a story from the LA Times. California's legislative leaders on Trump win. We woke up feeling like strangers in a foreign land. Of course you did.
Yeah.
This is
you
how
are.
Yes. Did you ever think it's not us, it's you?
Yeah, what's the David Lee Roth thing that you said, or Eddie Van Halen?
Yeah, the Eddie Van Halen rule. You kick out David Lee Roth, you bring in Sammy Hagar, you kick out Sammy Hagar, you bring in the guy from Extreme that nobody gives a shit about for a cup of coffee, you kick him out, you bring David Lee back, he's gone. And at some point, you got to ask yourself, well, maybe it isn't all of these lead singers. Maybe it's us.
Yeah.
Maybe it's me, Eddie. I'm Eddie. God, look in the mirror. Go, maybe it's me. Maybe Eddie Van Halen's the dick. Well, California, maybe it's you.
No one's going to cry if you leave.
I mean, I've brought this up for several years. You want to get pissed off sometime? If you want to take 30 minutes out of your day and just make yourself angry, Google California set to ban.
Yes.
And the amount of ridiculous bullshit that will pop up, anywhere from black cars to having a second refrigerator in your house. The amount of stuff that they want to ban, if that's the way you want to live your life, you can't have a fireplace, you can't cook outdoors, if that's the kind of stuff, go ahead and take all of your water with you. Go ahead.
Well, you want to know what they voted on? Because they had ballot referendums, too. They did vote to make recreational marijuana legal, which, duh. I mean, it's basically legal anyway there. They've had medicinal for so long.
So did Nevada.
And so did Maine and Massachusetts, I believe. And maybe one more state. And I think one voted it down. But speaking of California to ban, 67% of the state voted in favor of a plastic bag ban.
There you go.
Morons. How many times have you read stories? This is a fun one if you want to laugh at idiot liberals that don't understand the consequences of their actions. Look up the reusable bags and E. coli.
Oh, good God.
Yeah, those bags are making people sick. Whereas the plastic bags that you get at the store, they're reusable. I reuse them all the time. They turn into trash bags
but Tracy,
that go into
those
bathroom
are
trash
making
cans.
The planet sick.
They're actually not. It takes more energy to make paper bags, which last I checked are still being made out of trees, which when I was a kid, I remember people freaking out over. We're deforesting everything.
Right.
Remember when the rainforest, it was very chic to care about that?
Yes.
Not that we're taking trees out of the rainforests to use them to make the supermarket bags, but they're using trees in our own country for sure. It's just they do not get it.
Way to go, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you go to the grocery store with the plastic bags, and for the most part, at least in my area, the cashier is also bagging your groceries. Unless you go to a fancy grocery store where they still have baggers. But you go to a Walmart Supercenter or something like that to get groceries, and you may have 25 items, and you'll end up with 27 plastic bags.
Well, you can ask them to not do that.
I swear, sometimes I feel like they're going to open up a sliced cheese container to individually package them in plastic bags. It gets so ridiculous. Where I could walk out with paper bags with 2 bags of groceries like it's 1950, which is great because Donald Trump is going to take us back to the 1950s, Tracy Connors. That's the other thing I'm reading.
I can't wait. Well, that's why I was asking you if you were talking about the IUD story. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, I did not see that.
One of my liberal friends who's in shock shared a story on Facebook, why everybody's getting IUDs today. And I thought, first of all, well, that's a stupid headline because only women would be getting them. Unless we've decided we're getting rid of all pronouns. So
I'm sure Obamacare would cover an IUD for me.
I'm sure you're paying for it. Yeah, you probably are paying for an IUD. And I thought, really? People are running out to the doctor today? How many people actually showed up at a doctor's office yesterday and said, put an IUD in me right now because I'm never going to be able to have an abortion with Trump in the presidency? I don't think people think that far ahead that voted for Hillary and didn't understand that Trump had a good chance of winning. There's no way.
I understand if you're young and this is your first time with a Republican president, but Tracy, remind me, we had a president in the White House, George W. Bush. Were women going into back alleys to buy birth control pills? Because I don't remember. I'm just a caveman.
No.
I don't know these things. But that's what I'm told, though. Birth control pills will be banned.
Yep.
There will be no abortion.
Oh, they tried to pull that on Romney. Remember, wasn't it Snuffleupagus that asked him about that in one of the primary debates? Threw out some obscure case that was going on in Connecticut or something, and said, that might have been the Supreme Court case that he talked about, because there was a Supreme Court case about birth control back in the day. And would you stand for a ban on birth control? No. What are you talking about? Absolutely not. And I was
He's
having
lying.
this conversation. Right. I was having this conversation with my sister about just yesterday about this nonsense with abortion and stuff like this. And I said, I think this is a failing of civics education, that there are people who believe that the day that Trump is sworn in, all of a sudden the Supreme Court can reach back, pull up an old case and just say, nope, we're nullifying this decision. Roe v. Wade is done. This is not how the court system works in our country at all. I mean, it's possible. And I was reading, and I can't remember where today, and I'm sorry that I don't, because it was an interesting article, and I wanted to share it with my liberal friends to calm them down a little bit. And it was, maybe Trump's stance on a lot of these things is pretty in line with Democrats, but also with the libertarian model. Like Ron Paul had said, abortion should be decided on the state level. It shouldn't be a national policy. And that's what they think he'll do with this, if anything, is just say, no, or, we'll keep the Hyde Amendment on the federal level, which I applaud. I don't want to be paying for people's elective surgery. And let's be honest, that's what an abortion is 99.9% of the time. It's an elective surgery. So just like I'm not going to pay for your liposuction or your, laser hair removal, I shouldn't be paying. And I know these are two totally different things. So but I get the severity of the two, but it's still, you're electing to do that. It's by choice. It's not of medical necessity unless it is, and then it's okay. But it still shouldn't, the odds of those cases are so far, it's few and far between that it's totally irrelevant to the conversation.
What drives me nuts too is that we have, I saw the graphic, I believe last night, 33 states now that are controlled by Republican governors.
Doesn't surprise me.
And birth control pills have not been banned in those states, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Including Indiana here, who, my lib friends who have been under a Republican governor for 12 years, who were under a Democratic president for 8, or a Republican president for 8 with George W. Bush. They were still able somehow to get birth control pills. Now, maybe they were sending out to Canada. I don't know.
Sure. Making runs to Mexico.
Yes, that could be.
No, and if you'll remember, Republicans in Congress started talking about lifting the rules that make it you need a prescription to get birth control in several states. I don't know if it was. I think it might have happened at the federal level too.
How do you feel about that?
That's fine, but I think we need to have a conversation about what the effects of those pills are.
Yes.
Because that's never discussed. Just like the effects of having an abortion are never discussed. We're not allowed to tell you that going down in the future, you're more likely to have cancer, let alone the psychological repercussions of having an abortion. That's totally off the table. And I do think that's one of the good things about this Trump election is that people are going to feel emboldened to have these kind of conversations and just say, no, you're wrong. And that was the message that I sent out to my liberal friends today when I shared that, hey, dear Democrats, if you're confused as to why Trump won, maybe you should check this out. And I said, hey, it echoes the Art Wing thing. Like, if you were reading sites that told you unequivocally Hillary was going to win, I think you should seek out alternative sources of information.
Yeah.
Because they were so blatantly wrong. And you believed it. I mean, the Huffington Post has to take, they used to have like a content warning kind of deal at the bottom of every Trump article. It was like Trump is a fascist and Trump is this and that. They're going to now finally remove that.
Oh, that's nice of them.
Yeah. Well, remember, they kept him in the entertainment
Yes.
section.
And that's one of the problems. They've if anything does happen where you've seen some of it already, like I said earlier with the gentleman that was pulled out of his car and beaten because they thought he was a Trump supporter. They've whipped up the left into a frenzy to the point where I feel like the blood will be on the hands of some of these media outlets if there is real violence committed against.
Literally Hitler. I'm serious. We've talked about this multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
Literally Hitler.
If you get your information on a daily basis from the Huffington Post and Vox, and that's it, and the only people you talk to about politics are your liberal friends on Facebook, you're going to have a whole different perspective on life and on Donald Trump than someone who at least looks for different places for media besides some of the crazy left wing. I mean, Wonkat came out with a piece today. Was just fuck you America, I think was the title.
Yeah,
just
good.
Whipping these people up into a frenzy. And part of me wants to try to calm them down, because there are a lot of good people out there that I get are upset, because I know how upset I was in 2008.
Yes. But I do think the difference is we were legitimately upset, and the things that we were worrying about coming to pass came to pass.
Yes.
Whereas, I'm gulags and no abortions for anybody.
Right.
Everybody's going to be forced to get pregnant or some such nonsense. I mean, it's crazy. And I had a friend sharing all this. Oh, gays are going to get thrown in camps and stuff like this. I was like, what?
Yeah, conversion therapy. What's really funny about this, and we've talked about this before, is if Donald Trump had not run for president, and we put Hillary Clinton on one corner and Donald Trump in the other, and asked gay people, who do you think reflects your views on homosexuality? Who would be more tolerant? I think 99 out of 100 people would gravitate over to Donald Trump, because Hillary Clinton was a Johnny-come-lately when it comes to, was she saying, what is it, LBGTQ, LMNOP? Was she even talking about these issues 10 years ago?
No, she was firmly against it. And if you remember, they passed under Clinton their co-presidency, DOMA.
Right. So when I'm seeing all these people freaking out about how anti-gay the Trump administration is going to be, it's like, really? Have you been paying attention? Or is it just because he's got an R after his name?
Yeah,
this is just a knee-jerk reaction. But,
no, I mean, he had... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, but I'm seeing this freak out. This is where I was going with that. Is part of me wants to calm these people down, but then part of me just wants to sit back, because when they're having this kind of reaction, and they're pointing at middle America and calling them every name in the book, they're moonshine drinking rednecks with 4 teeth. All that's telling me is they're not going to learn the lessons of this election. They're going to continue to insult these people, and maybe Donald Trump in 2018 won't get shellacked in the midterms and lose the Senate, and lose some Republicans in the House, because middle America will once again say, God, you know what? Screw you. I'm tired of being called a racist. I'm tired of being called stupid, because I don't want to live my life like a typical Californian. Screw you. Secede from the Union. Nobody's going to shed a tear in middle America if California becomes its own state or its own nation.
Right. Bye. They're already broke.
Yeah.
You're a drag on us.
The California currency would be about worth as much as a peso.
Yes.
So go.
They'd probably go on the peso.
Yeah. Toodles.
They might join Mexico. They should. They absolutely should. But the one thing that I think is interesting, too, about Trump and the left is all into the identity politics stuff. And that comes from the top of the party down. So you remember seeing on the Obama site, if you ever went there in 2012 or 2008, you could enter all these different portals: women for Obama, blacks for Obama, black women for Obama, Latino women and all this kind of stuff. And they always do that. They stratify everybody. And Hillary did it too. And with Trump, it happened organically. And it was
Yep.
really cool to see that. So there was that whole Gays for Trump movement. And one of the last appearances he did, I think it was in Colorado, he got up on stage with the rainbow flag.
Yeah.
And I had my gay Republican friends sharing that around everywhere. And some of them aren't even Republicans, but they were just like, this is awesome. I never thought I would see this. He brought Peter Thiel to the RNC, and Thiel got up on stage and proudly proclaimed that he's gay and a Republican, and everybody applauded. I mean, these are things that our leftist friends that are freaking out are in active denial about. They cannot.
This is what they claimed that they wanted to have happen. And now when they knew it wasn't going to happen, and now they're seeing it happen, and they're freaking out because that may mean that gays will leave the Democratic plantation.
Well, they have nothing left to give them over there. I mean, we've talked about this too, that after the Supreme Court decision came down legalizing gay marriage in all 50 states, that there were articles where they're like, what do we do now?
Right.
Where's our fight go? You guys are done. That's it. I mean, the only other thing that I know that they have actively that they think is necessary is having protections for people in the workplace that get fired over their sexual orientation, which I have a hard time believing that that's happening right now. And if it did, that there wouldn't be a huge backlash if you just put that out in the public.
But such bullshit, you know. And going back to the RFRA law here in Indiana, oh my gosh, bartenders will be able to kick you out if you're gay. It won't serve you a drink. It's like, really? In this day and age with Facebook and Yelp, social media, we had all these hoax stories going around where waitresses that were gay were claiming that Christians were writing mean notes. You know, they're all hoaxes, but it didn't matter. As soon as they said it happened, swept the country. If you've got a business that's trying to fuel itself through bigotry, you don't think that business is going to go out of business just based on the social media reaction?
Yeah, it needs to be codified into law to make it real. No. There are other ways to deal with this. And I'm not encouraging. I think that's disgusting that somebody would get fired over this. But the other thing it does is it opens people up to file frivolous lawsuits. And that's how the left functions. They're mentally defective malcontents. So if you were gay and you got fired, what are you going to turn around and do? If that's not codified into law, you're going to say, oh, that's why you did it.
Right.
And then you got to drag that employer into court, and then they have to prove that, no, you weren't showing up. You were late. You were stealing. Like, who knows what it is? But here was the legitimate grounds for firing you. And I think employers should be able to fire people at will for any reason whatsoever.
Of course.
It's called a contract. You enter into a contract when you get a job. And if you are unsatisfied with that contract, it's okay to break it. Just like you can quit your job whenever you want to.
Right.
Unbelievable. But I wanted to tell you one of the funniest coalitions that I saw form in this, and it just tickles me so much, is that the Amish in Pennsylvania got pretty loud.
Oh?
And we have a sizable Amish population in Lancaster County, which is about 40 minutes from where I live. And they started Amish PAC, and they were on the Trump train, which is amazing. It's like, how did you people even find out about this? Honestly, like, they're not tied into social media. I don't know that they have radio. The Mennonites, which are kind of like a sister sect of Amish, they actually use electricity, but they have, I think they're kerosene generators or something like this that they use in farm equipment and things like that. So they do have some exposure to what I think they call us Westerners. But the Amish got on board. So there was an issue beforehand. People were worrying about them needing to get rides to the polls. So this was facilitated by, get this, the giant Chinese contingent of Trump supporters in Pennsylvania. I had told you that my mom went to that one event with it. Ivanka was there, and she was just flabbergasted that there were all these Chinese Americans running around with Chinese for Trump shirts on, and just incredibly enthusiastic for him. Mm-hmm. So those guys coordinated with the Amish to get them driven there. And the mental picture in my mind is so hilarious of a bunch of Chinese guys showing up and being like, get in, we're going to the polls. And then you got the Amish with their little hats and their beards and stuff, and just all going there to do it for Trump.
And that should prove something to the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
It really should. It won't, because I don't believe once Trump is gone, it's going to be a lot like Reagan, where it was just an anomaly, and then they'll go back to Washington, D.C. think. But if you try to sell freedom,
Yeah.
you package it in a way that you're not going to try to split people up and say, this is, we're going to have a Latino Republican Party, blacks for the Republican Party, the one-eyed Jacks Kings with an axe wing of the Republican Party, gingers for the Republican Party. It's just sell freedom.
Right. And then people will organize themselves in groups that they feel comfortable with.
Yes.
And it's just human nature to group up with people that look like you or come from the same country as you if you're an immigrant or have the same religious background or whatever. And that's what you saw happening. But it wasn't coming top down. It was bottom up.
You don't pander. I mean, because it's so obvious. People are not stupid. This is, again, shows the elites just how out of touch they are. Black people are smart enough to know that Hillary Clinton is not carrying a bottle of hot sauce in her purse.
Right, right.
Why say something like that?
Well, they also have long memories.
Yes.
Yeah. They remember the crime bill. And I've heard now, CNN, the panels have been epic. And I've loved watching this. They still can't come to terms with reality. Out of none of the lefty pundits' mouths have I heard the words emails.
Yeah.
And except for, WikiLeaks got them in the, that whole nonsense about it. But it's not. Hillary Clinton brought this all on herself.
Yes.
She's thoroughly unlikable. She's completely compromised. And she's beyond corrupt. She's never had a single principle in her life.
We talked about this in the primaries when Trump kept winning. And you had the Rubio people, the Cruz people, the Kasich people wanting to blame the voters. Oh, the voters suck. The voters are stupid. It's like, well, no, maybe it's not the voters that suck. Maybe the candidate sucks.
Maybe it's Eddie Van Halen.
Right. Maybe it's Eddie Van Halen. But 99 times out of 100, maybe it's not the voters. Maybe it's the candidate. And she was terrible. Nobody likes her. Except for the diehards that are sitting there violently weeping. And I would say that not the diehard Hillary supporters, but the people that are walking around like zombies in New York City today. It's not because they wanted a Hillary Clinton presidency. It's because they've been whipped up into a frenzy of fear over what a Donald Trump presidency could bring. Mm-hmm. That's why it's Zombie Nation today in a lot of corners of lefty land. It's not because, oh my God, it was my dream to have Hillary Clinton be president of the United States. She's so wonderful. She was my champion. No. They're scared
the only
of that
people
guy.
I say saying that stuff are the celebrities that, unlike what Monica was saying about Sarah Jessica Parker cowering and crying in a corner, were nice enough to record themselves for all of us to see crying. I don't know if you've seen this. Miley Cyrus had a breakdown and filmed it and shared it with the world. Epic. Chelsea Handler cried on her show. I just saw the clip. The Daily Mail has a good roundup of all of this, the kvetching that went on with late night hosts. And Chelsea was one of the people. And I don't know that Miley threatened to leave, but Chelsea did.
Yeah.
And I actually thought, I had a lot of respect for her. I've read, I think, all of her books. I used to love her show. And I liked her stand-up back in the day. I really thought she was kind of like an FU person. Like, she's self-made. She's a hard-ass worker. And you would think that somebody like Hillary Clinton, she would be like, oh, that's, the silver spoon bitch. Nope, loved her because women, get the hell out of here. So she had said she was going to move to Spain. I think she already has a house there.
Okay.
But now she's saying she's got to stay and fight. And she had Barbara Boxer on, and she's sitting there crying. And it's so pathetic. I want to be like, really? You've made yourself into a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
She came from a lower middle class family in New Jersey, the youngest of like 5 or something kids. Like, she always talks about how her dad was such an F up and, all this stuff. And she did this all on her own, left at 18 and built herself a little mini empire. I mean, her story does not parallel Hillary's at all.
Right.
Hillary hitched her wagon to power and rode that to the bitter end.
Hilco.
So no, I don't.
She's Yoko Ono of the political movement.
She is. She absolutely is. And nobody would have, when John died, nobody said, hey, we can get the Beatles back together and plug Yoko in and everything will be good. It just doesn't work that way. But it's so amazing to me to see the breakdown of these people and the crying. And I guess Seth Meyers, I believe, got kind of teary.
Oh, my God.
It's just like, dude, you're such a bitch. And Kimmel was kind of fun. I haven't watched all the clips, but I will share this. He did the 5 stages of grief for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jimmy Fallon was just like, look, dude, I'm here to make everybody laugh, and that's what we're going to do. And that's the end of it. So
Sack up. I don't understand how you make political figures your hero.
Yeah.
How is that possible? They're wired so differently. If Trump would have lost, I wouldn't have felt bad about Trump losing as far as, oh my God, my hero lost. I would have been like, oh my God, the country's screwed.
Yeah, we're going to keep up with this crap for another 4 years.
To cry?
Well, what are we going to tell our children? That's the refrain that I've heard quite a bit. I mean, did your daughters come to you on Wednesday and say, Dad?
Well, no, of course not, because I told them.
Does this mean we can never be president?
Right. Well, I think it's not more. Gosh, it may have been Dana Lash, but I saw Sarah Smith put it on her Facebook. It's like, I don't know what you're all worried about telling your daughters. I learned about blowjobs through President Clinton, and I turned out okay. It's all going to be okay.
No, it's just amazing that they jump on the top of morality mountain all of a sudden.
Oh, right?
They just run there. I mean, and it's the hysterical mischaracterization of Trump as a human being. And I've seen this meme, and I think we've talked about it before, and it's all these photographs of Trump with black celebrities just having the best time. You know, and a bunch of them came out and supported him, including, you know, your favorite murderer, Don King.
Yes.
And Mike Tyson. And a bunch of, I can't, Omarosa from his show. I'm trying to remember other people. A lot of rappers kind of were like, hey, he has a chance. You know, and Chappelle in the last week came out and was defending him and talking about how disgusting it was that they were mischaracterizing his public pronouncements of things.
You got a sense from Chappelle's comments that he may have voted for him, but he didn't want to come out and say it. So
right.
He said,
well, he did say he voted for Hillary.
You know, he
said he had voted for her. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you've got people like Van Jones, just, you know, I don't know you've got a lot of people that are scared tonight. Like, I'm getting messages from my Muslim friends and from my black friends. And what do they think is going to happen? I mean, Gavin has said this repeatedly. Like, what is the racist piece of legislation that Trump's going to put forward?
Right.
Is it, hey, you know, all blacks are out. We're sending you guys back to Africa. Do you really think that would happen? In what universe? People would never stand for that kind of crap. And he would never even think to do such a thing. It's just absurd.
Van Jones was so unhinged election night.
Yes.
He started talking about how this is a white lash.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, my God, can you imagine 2008 when we saw record numbers of African Americans turn out at the election, the polling booths or the precincts? If you would have had white Republicans saying this is a black lash.
Yeah. No, you can't do that.
And that's
one of the reasons
why
over.
That's one of the reasons why Trump won. Middle America is getting tired of having everything blamed on them. Some guy in Racine, Wisconsin, who could barely pay his bills. You know, if you're in rural Rust Belt country, you've seen your town slowly die over the last 3 decades, and you got to hear, if you're white, and you got to hear about white privilege.
Yeah.
And how everything's your fault. At some point, after you keep getting beaten up, you're going to say, screw you, enough is enough. I'm not going to take this anymore. And it has nothing to do with race. You know, these people aren't bigots. They just said, enough. I'm tired of getting blamed for everything. Get me out of this healthcare system. Stop blaming. I'm going to vote for Trump. Maybe this will kill political correctness. Maybe I'll stop hearing about white privilege. This is a big middle finger to all these people.
Right, as Michael Moore put out. But it's also like the rent is too damn high on a national level.
Yeah.
I love that guy, and I wish I could remember his name. But the other thing about all of this white lash garbage, is the numbers don't bear that out, Van. Trump got a bigger percentage of the black vote, just like we said he would, than Romney or Bush or anybody. And he also got a bigger percentage of the Latino vote. Although I saw some pundit, and I can't remember her name, on CNN that has a Latino last name. And she likes to affect an accent when necessary to prove her creds, I guess.
Yeah.
And she was throwing a royal fit and being like, oh, that exit polling is so not accurate at all. Like there was this this news organization, Noticias de Latino or whatever, that was on the scene. And they think it's like, oh, it's actually 18% because CNN was saying 29% Latino vote went to Trump. And I mean, you're talking about on a national level.
Right.
Whatever. I can understand that. But if you look at, I bet you Miami's numbers are different. I'd be interested to see how that breaks out. And this is all based on exit polling anyway. It's not like on your ballot, you write down your race. They haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, that's coming.
I'm frankly shocked. I know. It'll be the census. You vote on the census form from now on, so we can totally break down the demographics.
You get the white ballot. You get the
But it was
other
interesting.
ballot.
But it was interesting to see that. They're saying that Trump got 12% of the black vote. I believe that. I think it's probably higher than that in certain areas, and they didn't forget about the crime bill and the super predator stuff. That was in their minds.
And there are not enough bottles of hot sauce to cancel that out.
No, and she can't go on urban radio enough times to make up for that. You can't drag out Jay-Z and Beyonce. I mean, it's just total pander city.
And that should have been a cue right there for people. When she's got to throw a big event in Philadelphia the weekend before the election.
Yeah. She was in Philly twice, I think. I think she was in Saturday night with Katy Perry and then Monday night with, get this, to turn out the black vote in Philly. Who would you put on stage?
In Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Well, some sort of athlete. I don't know who's the...
No, I mean, if you're throwing a concert, which is what she did on Monday night.
Oh, Will Smith.
Oh, yeah, that's a good call. I didn't even think about that. That's smart. Well, you've got a lot of Philly soul, too, people. Like Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
Is around. Didn't she sing at the inauguration for Obama?
I think so.
She's Philly, I believe. I mean, Philly's, soul sound and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it had a pretty big alternative branch of Motown, if you will, that not in Motown. But no, she had Bruce Springsteen and John Bon Jovi. It's like, really?
Wow.
Huh. Pathetic. But it didn't work. None of it worked. You can't make her cool. Trump was definitely the cool candidate in all of this. Well, and he legitimately had hung out with a lot of those people in real life, would socialize with them.
Well, if you even look at Minnesota and what happened there, the final results in Minnesota, 46.9% of the vote went to Hillary. 45.4% went to Trump. A percentage and a half difference. It's amazing. In 2012, Barack Obama carried Minnesota by almost 8 percentage points.
Yeah. Well, look, a Republican hasn't won Pennsylvania since 1988.
Yeah. And we didn't even talk tonight, and we've been talking for a while, about, we kept hearing how Trump was going to have a negative effect down ticket.
Oh, yeah.
But at the end of the day, there were Trump coattails. And Pat Toomey is one of those people who was the recipient, along with Rob Johnson in Wisconsin.
Right. Ron Johnson won huge. Toomey almost didn't win because he refused. He didn't until 7 o'clock on election day. He held out whether or not he was going to vote for Trump. That's how terrified he was. And I can Pennsylvania is an odd state as far as that goes. And I don't know if he was seeing numbers that came out of Philly that were like way down and it wasn't going to hurt him. And he needed to he's seeing that the rural numbers are way up. But I mean, I told you, Trump lost my county and Romney won it.
Wow. And
it's the never Trump, she, frou, the penny loafers with the pink socks crowd.
Well,
we just can't vote for him. He's gauche.
I mean, I think most of us wrote off Ron Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to, and Wisconsin, I mean, I thought he could win Michigan. Not Ron Johnson, Trump. And Pennsylvania, I still thought was a long shot, but you knew Pennsylvania, obviously. You lived there. I knew Michigan because I lived there. So I was more comfortable saying that he could carry Michigan. But when he carried Wisconsin. I think everyone was shocked, and probably including people in the Trump campaign. I believe I heard someone on CNN say that they had talked to people inside the Trump campaign who were getting internal polling from Wisconsin saying that he was going to carry Wisconsin, and they didn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a complete shock when it ended up happening. I mean, this is a state that Paul Ryan couldn't even carry for Barack Obama back in, or for Mitt Romney back in 2012.
Mitt Romney. Yeah.
So there was
this is a big change election. Yeah. People want to change. And it's not shocking to me that Mark Kirk lost in Illinois.
No.
Because I think wasn't 2010 the year that Blago went to jail?
Yes.
Yeah, so you had a high level of corruption going on in the state, and that was people's way of smacking back at the Democrats. So speaking of corruption, I'm already hearing this nonsense, what I think is nonsense, that Trump should pardon Hillary or say we're not going to prosecute her.
I don't think he's going to.
We're not going to appoint the special. That makes me really angry, because I think this web is so widespread that you need to get it and root it out entirely. Because there's people, obviously, in the DOJ and the FBI that were compromised in this.
I think here's what's going to happen, in my opinion. I believe, and this would be a huge misjudgment, he's going to get these Republicans coming in as advisors. You're going to have Reince, they're talking, is going to be his chief of staff.
What? I had just read earlier today that Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, Ivanka's husband, might be his chief of staff.
Oh, really?
I can't remember where I saw that. It might have been the Daily Mail headline.
What I'm worried about is I don't want to see him take on the Republican mentality of, if we try to make peace with these people, they'll like us.
Yeah.
And what I'm worried about is if he gets some of these Washington insiders whispering in his ear, listen, it would really be, the campaign is over. The nation needs to heal. We've got these riots in the streets. They're going to protest your inauguration. I think maybe it would be a good gesture on your part to come out and say, we aren't going to try to get a special prosecutor in the Hillary Clinton case. And that would be a good way to reach across the aisle. Oh, okay. These people are still going to hate you after you do that. They're still going to be protesting. And what you're going to do is piss on your base if you do that. Not a good move.
Yeah, I agree. And if anything, maybe you say, okay, we're done litigating the email thing, but the investigations into the Clinton Foundation are going to continue.
That has to happen.
Because charity fraud is so beyond the pale, it's repulsive. And that takes down a whole bunch of people.
But some of these state attorney generals need to step up to the plate too.
Right.
It can't all be on the feds. At some point, there has been so much evidence of wrongdoing in the Clinton Foundation that has been unearthed that I cannot believe there aren't some hungry, motivated attorney generals out there from different states to be like, okay, if the feds aren't going to do it, we're going to do it.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you run on a platform of draining the swamp, it's time to pull the plug.
Yeah.
And let the water out. And that includes unmasking these people. I mean, that would be the greatest unmasking of the left, as far as I'm concerned, just how corrupt they are and how little they actually care about people, because people still believe that.
And we haven't talked about the Never Trump movement. Has anyone checked on George Will or Bill Kristol in the past couple of days? Make sure they're okay. No. I mean, I was worried. She's not Never Trump, but I was worried about the mental well-being of Andrea Mitchell election night, because the hopes and dreams of Andrea Mitchell were pinned directly to her champion Hillary Clinton, and to see her go down in flames, I disagree. I didn't think that she was dead, and I think it's fair to say that I'm right, that Hillary Clinton wasn't dead on election night.
No, I thought she was either dead or on the run.
Drunk
was also, that was my plan C. Drunk and angry and crying a lot. I mean, there's a report that Ed Klein, got tipped off to that Hillary had called one of her childhood friends that she's still friends with, which shocks the shit out of me.
Right.
Well, I mean, women in general, we don't maintain friendships for that long. It's not like men. But she had called her just crying hysterically to the point where the woman on the other end of the phone could barely make out what she was saying, except for she was blaming Comey and somebody else for this. No introspection. No, I'm a terrible person. And I did something incredibly corrupt and stupid by having a private server set up in my house so I could run this side grift the entire time I was in office and compromise state secrets and the rest. No. It's somebody else's fault, which is typical, leftist thinking to begin with. But
yeah,
that's what I guess she was doing. And when she came out to speak, there was a split second where I felt bad for her. And then I reminded myself that this woman is a sociopath that's just, an integral part of destroying a big part of the world right now and people's lives. And I can't feel any sympathy for her whatsoever. And she looked horrid. I mean, her face was so swollen. I'm like,
well, it's
wow.
Alcohol. I mean,
between the hangover and the crying. I mean, it looked like she had gained 10 pounds in a matter of 24, 36 hours, which I know is impossible.
They finally took her off the anti-seizure medicine because screw it. Who cares if she has one in front of everybody? They'll just feel sorry for her.
Oh, that would have been great. And her eye wasn't tracking again. I'm sitting there watching, and I've watched it a couple times. Like, you just see clips of it on the news, and you see her left eye does not track with the right at all. It kind of does its own thing. It's creepy.
I didn't see South Park last night, but apparently
I haven't seen it either.
Apparently they had to rewrite the entire episode.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they had already written it. It was already in the can that Hillary was winning. And then once they found out that Trump won, they had to go in.
So they turned around an episode in less than 24 hours?
Yes.
Wow.
I can't remember what the name of the episode. Something like "Hello, Madam President," and they had to change the name of it to "Oh, jeez."
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm optimistic about the next 4 years. I'm thinking of it as like an 80s reboot because I was a little too young to really remember the Reagan years, but I remember the feeling of it where everybody was like optimistic and everything was awesome and it was like money, 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 money. And Trump was a part of that culturally. Like that's when he came into the public eye.
Social media is going to make it so much different though.
It's possible, but I do think the collective self-esteem of America is going to be on the rise.
Well, it's funny. I mean, as soon as we found out that he got elected, Russia came out right away. Putin said that he wants to normalize relations with the United States. You're seeing today that both Canada and Mexico have come out and said that they're fine with renegotiating NAFTA.
Yep. No, and the Chinese are acting obnoxious, which is interesting, but not totally unexpected. And the stock market, I love it because, we're in, I don't know if you've peeked in now to one Facebook group that we are part of that's 99.9% frothing idiot liberals, and they were having a full meltdown.
Yes.
And at the time, the futures markets and those kind of things, because I don't know if they're smart enough to understand that the New York Stock Exchange closes and wasn't open when they made the announcement. They were like, oh, the stocks are tanking. Like, oh, this is terrible. It's like, and they started talking about Brexit, which if you'll remember, the markets bounced back over there pretty damn quickly.
Yeah.
But believe yesterday, the day after the election, was the Dow set an all-time record.
Yeah.
And it's continuing to go up today.
Well, I was, when it became clear that he was going to win, Jake Tapper kept talking about the futures market. I was really worried about his portfolio as much as he was talking about it, and he was, grim. I mean, it was 1929 all over again. Just based on this election. But I'm telling you, I got so much joy out of watching CNN the first few hours. I mean, Wolf Blitzer. Oh my gosh, Hillary just sprung ahead again in North Carolina. That's great news. It's like
Jesus.
Orgasmic. And then looks like Donald Trump is leading in Florida. Oh wait, she took the lead. She took the lead at balloon drop. Oh, Donald Trump just took the lead again. And then when John King was like, okay, John King was excellent that night, by the way, if you were watching CNN, I believe anyway. And, you know, he was the guy that was in charge of the map, you know, and they have the touch screen, huge map, and he's going over the counties, and he's starting to say, you know, Wolf, I don't know where she's going to get the votes. Broward County in Florida, that's about the only place, but you look over in these red counties here, there's still some Trump votes here, there's still some Trump votes here, there's still some Trump. But she could still do it, right? Well, I guess it's possible. Hillary Clinton is still in play in Florida. It's like, holy. I mean, talk about someone else.
Give it a 1% chance. Wow.
Talk about someone else that probably went home and immediately swam in a bottle of Jack Daniels. It was Wolf Blitzer. God bless him.
Sad. I wonder if have you seen a supercut of all of the denialism yet?
No,
somebody has to have put that together. Because like I was saying, I mean, MSNBC just couldn't comprehend, refusing to put up numbers on the board. And there were states that were called like an hour ahead. And I was watching the AP, their Twitter feed. Yeah. I mean, the AP called Pennsylvania for Trump maybe half an hour to 45 minutes before anybody on television did.
That's incredible. My problem the whole time was, I don't know if you know this about me, Tracy Connors, but I am a glasses half empty kind of cat.
This is brand new information.
So I'm channeling my inner Detroit Lions fan, and so I'm looking at this. Okay, this can't last. This can't last. He's not going to keep the lead in Florida. When's the shoe going to drop? What? And you know, I'm watching that New York Times site, which was just fantastic. They really did a great job with that site with the real-time projection forecast, where it's like, okay, Donald Trump has an 80% chance of winning Pennsylvania, and I'm looking at this at 1 o'clock in the morning going, okay, come on, no, really? He's really going to pull up? And then I go back to Michigan, and I keep seeing the votes that are not being counted in Wayne County, Detroit.
Right. Like, yeah, okay. I don't know if you could access all of the cool stuff on that from your phone, because if I was sitting on my laptop on it and they had an interactive map of the state showing you which counties were still outstanding, how many there were from those, how many precincts were left to count in those. And then they said, okay, I was dutifully watching Pennsylvania, of course, because I was like, oh my God, it looks like Pennsylvania is going to be the one that's called last just because they're holding out on these damn votes. So it'll be Pennsylvania that gets to put him over the top. And they were like, okay, this is how many votes we believe have already been counted. It's 5,700,000 something. And of that, Trump leads those votes by 1.2%. And then they would say, this is how many votes we believe are outstanding. And of those votes, this was the interesting part and why I was like, why aren't they calling this on television? Because they said, okay, when I first started watching it, there were 220,000 something votes outstanding. And we think Trump leads those by 4% something. And it's like, okay, so unless she was ahead on those by 80%. I mean, the math you can't argue with math. In this situation, like she would have to get every single one of those votes. And there's no way that that's happening. They can't fake that many votes that quickly. Like it's impossible. Like it's insurmountable. And so this was 2 hours probably before they called it on television. And I'm getting text messages from my anxious aunt who I've been telling for months that Trump is going to win. And she's like, but they're not calling it on television. And I was like, I understand this. These are people that have created this whole false narrative and it's coming apart in front of them and they cannot admit it. Just go to bed. Just understand that Trump is the president now. And I mean, she's still sending me stuff like, hey, they're saying that, what was it, that Michigan might go to him and they might do a recount. I'm like, just stop it. Just stop. It's over. He won. This is reality. I know it's difficult to let it sink in a little bit. It's so surreal that after losing so much and so often over the past 8 years, I actually won something. Get used to it. This is the first win, and I'm not going to get sick of winning. Well, I made that vow on Twitter. I'm not.
They're clinging on to the fact that Hillary won the popular vote.
Well, here's what I have to say to that. Why, if you were a Republican that lived in New York or California, would you bother going to vote?
Right.
There wasn't a Senate. Well, there was a Senate race in California to fill Barbara Boxer's seat. But the way that they do it in California is that the top two finishers in the primary go on to the general. So they had two Democrats So there's no incentive except for those stupid ballot measures. So maybe you would go out to vote if you're a Republican Trump supporter that wants legal pot. That could be something that gets you to the polling place.
Right.
But other than that, what's the incentive? You know you're going to get crushed in that state. So that's got to depress it. And plus, we have friends that live there that were just like, I can vote for Gary Johnson because I want to see the third party gain some traction. And it doesn't matter if I vote for Trump or not in my state. There's no way we're overcoming this. And there was a time when I thought that was possible, that Trump maybe could win New York. And I certainly thought New Jersey might be in play too.
Right.
But the same holds true for New York. What is the incentive? And Massachusetts and Vermont? Like, why bother? You're so outnumbered. So yes, great. And they're going to whine and bitch about the Electoral College like crazy. And they don't understand it was put in place to keep us safe from majority rule.
Right.
Like, we don't live in a democracy. And that Hillary Clinton person thing that came out there all bloated and weepy said our constitutional democracy. No, lady. We have a constitutional republic.
Right.
There's a difference between the two.
She won by 2.5 million votes in California.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the difference. I think she won the popular vote maybe by 1 million.
Yeah.
So
she's not running for
congratulations.
president of California.
No, and as people caller to Rush today pointed out, yeah, great. She won the popular vote. You got to wonder how many illegals voted, how many, just scam votes, all that kind of stuff gets thrown in there. And then, as Rush pointed out, and I totally forgot about this, I guess she only won by Virginia by about 60,000.
Yeah.
And if you'll remember, Terry McAuliffe had granted voting rights, restored voting rights to the felons in Virginia.
Yeah.
And there are about 60,000 of them.
Lie, cheat, steal.
It's a giant con. Just like I said to that poor social justice warrior who thinks that everybody's going to drop dead tomorrow because Trump is going to single-handedly destroy the planet.
Are we going to the inauguration?
Yeah. I would like to.
Oh, it'd be fun to do a show that night. And plus we have people.
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
No,
we always have these big plans. No, I would not want to sit still for an hour that night to talk. I mean, if we could take
people that we're going to be invited to some parties.
I would hope so. I mean, I hit up our friends over at Breitbart and congratulated them, specifically the ones that jumped over to the campaign side and said, I can't, you guys did this. I mean, there are a lot of people that made this possible. A lot of individuals that don't get and then don't want recognition for it. So they know. And I was like, when's the party? Let's do this. And I hit up our good friend Sonny. I'm like, when are we doing shots at Trump International?
Yeah.
Are we doing that for the inauguration? Like, what's going on? I mean, she's thrilled, but she's like, this is the first step. I'm already thinking ahead and what we're going to do next. And I think it's awesome. And I do think there is now a Trump Republican, where you can never say there was a Romney Republican or a McCain Republican, but there's an attitude and an outlook and a street fighter mentality that's going to be coming along, and the social justice warriors are on notice now.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, we've been talking for over 2 hours.
Damn.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
Well, I guess that's it. We got to thank our good friend Monica Crowley. You can see her on Fox News and check out her column every Thursday at the Washington Times. Tracy, where can everyone find the Enough Already podcast?
You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. Are we on TuneIn? I think we are on TuneIn. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And SoundCloud, Facebook, and at EnoughAlreadyPodcast.com.
Music for the Enough Already podcast is provided to us courtesy of YoPaulyMusic.com. Our good friend Paul Couteau does great work. Check it out. If you want to put together a YouTube video and you don't want them yanking your video down or muting your content because you're using licensed music, go over to YoPaulyMusic.com. Contact Pauly. He'll set you up. Well, that's it, Tracy. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We will be back next week with an all-new Enough Already podcast.